Hey guys, Aaron Cybertron Zhang here, and today I'm back with another episode of Road to Ranked, where I climb the Online Series 12 ladder and provide live commentary as I go. Today we're trying out a super fun team featuring Special Life Orb Rayquaza. This was built by a player called Scott, aka Scotch Tape VGC, and I've linked his Twitter down in the description below, as well as a really awesome in-depth team report about this team. I think it gives some amazing insight on how you can build around some more niche restricted Pokemon, and so I'd really recommend you check that out, especially if you want to learn how to play the team, because there are recommended modes for all the archetypes that you are going to run into, or most of them, I should say. So yeah, as always, I'll do a quick breakdown of the team, but if you want to just skip to the battles, check out the timestamps linked in the description below. Thanks so much as always for watching. If you enjoy, please share your support by leaving a like. I'd really appreciate it. And question of the day, I want to know what you would rate Rayquaza out of 10 just in terms of design as well as how much you like it. So let me know in the comment section below. So first of all, let's talk about Rayquaza a little bit. Why is this Pokemon not used very much in the format? Well, it is a little bit slower than a lot of things that threaten it. For example, Zacian, being the most common restricted Pokemon, matches up quite nicely into Rayquaza, as it can go for, Behemoth Blade or just play rough. You also have to worry about things like Will-O-Wisp from Calyrex Shadow Rider normally, although this is actually a special Rayquaza set, making it, I think, very, very awesome, because you don't actually have to worry about Will-O-Wisp or Intimidate or Reflect, and I think when a lot of players see Rayquaza, they immediately think it's going to be physical rather than special. And part of the reason for that is just because historically Rayquaza has been built physically, especially when it was a Mega Evolution back in the day, right? And so, yeah, the idea here is that you can really catch your opponents off guard with the special set. And Rayquaza's downside is that, yeah, there's just a lot of things that can threaten it with like a one-hit knockout. Obviously, being weak to both Dragon and Ice is not exactly super fun, and so the way you kind of get around that is, one, by, ideally picking up one-hit knockouts on slow Pokemon that can threaten you. And so, for example, like, yes, Zacian can outspeed you, but that's why you have Whimsicott on the team. You set up Tailwind or go for a Cotton Spore, and suddenly Rayquaza can just go for the Life Orb Max Quake and pick up a potential one-hit knockout onto Zacian, right? And so part of the thing with Rayquaza, it's that it has obviously really good same type attack bonus attacks between Draco Meteor and Hurricane as max moves. These moves can like one-shot a lot of non-restricted and non-Dynamax Pokemon, right? And so Rayquaza actually matches up very nicely into a lot of the common Pokemon in the format that aren't restricted mons. You just have to be very careful about how you play against, some of the big threats like Zacian or Kyogre with Max Hailstorm or Calyrex Ice Rider, for example, as they can all very easily knock out Rayquaza. So one of the things that you can do with this team is really try to stall out your opponent's Dynamax first, then play towards a late game Rayquaza sweep. Because this Pokemon is really frail, you have to be very careful about, when you're Dynamaxing it and how you're trading with it. And so it's paired with Zacian here, and Zacian's like an inherent natural partner because the Rayquaza pretty much always wants a Dynamax. You don't really want to give it a partner that also wants to like max pretty frequently, and obviously their resistances cover for each other really well, right? Rayquaza's weak to Ice, but Zacian can resist that. Zacian's weak to Fire, but obviously Rayquaza can resist that, and Zacian doesn't like ground type attacks, and Rayquaza is perfect to switch into those. So defensively, they just work really well together. And obviously Zacian is just an incredibly powerful Pokemon. It's even stronger when you pair it with Tailwind support from Whimsicott, as well as max Airstream support from Rayquaza. So much about this team is trying to outspeed your opponent, and if you can put Rayquaza and Zacian next to each other, and you already have the speed advantage, there are very few Pokemon in the format that can reliably take like a max move from Rayquaza and an attack from Zacian before getting a move off, right? And so speed is really important with this team, and that's why Whimsicott not only has Tailwind, but it also has Cotton Spore. Helping Hand's also pretty cool here because a lot of the times people are going to lead Fake Out into Whimsicott. That allows you to just go for something like a Helping Hand Behemoth Blade or a Helping Hand Max Airstream with, Whimsicott Zacian or Whimsicott Rayquaza. And I found that I really like leading those, just apply a lot of pressure immediately. To round out the team, you've got Gastrodon. Gastrodon exists here because otherwise Kyogre is really, really tough to deal with, and Kyogre Zacian is still one of the more difficult restricted pairs to go up against, but with Gastrodon, you can patch up that, weakness a good amount. You've got classic Shukaberry Incineroar here. Not much to really say about that. And then you've got Safety Goggles, Inner Focus, Umbreon here. So we featured Umbreon a couple times. The idea is that this is just a really bulky Pokemon that has a very favorable matchup into things like Calyrex Shadow Rider, Lunala, Groudon. You can disrupt on both the physical and the special end. You've got Snarl, right, to decrease special attacks, and Foul Play just does a lot of damage on the physical end. And then Yawn and Helping Hand are just both really good utility moves as well. So you can, either play very aggressively early on and just go with things like Whimsicott Rayquaza, Whimsicott Zacian as a lead, or you can look towards stalling out your opponent's Dynamax, like baiting them to Dynamax, getting a Yawn off with the Umbreon or Gastrodon, cycling Incineroar for Intimidate, then using Rayquaza in the late game to Dynamax. with this team, you're almost always maxing Rayquaza. Very few cases where maybe you max Gastrodon, but Rayquaza's going to come out pretty much, all the time, and it's going to max, I would say, in probably 90% plus of games at least. So, yeah. Overall, the goal is to just sweep your opponent with it, especially if you can stall out their Dynamax, and either, push the tempo immediately and, try to pick up 3 big knockouts in the first 3 turns of the game, or stall out your opponent's max and then use the late game Rayquaza to really clean up everything. So, I can't wait to feature this team. Let's get into it. Alright, our first game of the day, and we're up against probably one of the worst matchups for this team, which is Zacian plus Kyogre. The main reason is because the Kyogre is just, going to be pretty good defensively against Rayquaza, and Zacian obviously also matches up quite well into it. But that doesn't mean that we don't have answers into it. So, how do I want to approach the matchup? I think it's probably going to be Whimsicott, Gastrodon, Rayquaza, and Zacian. If I were my opponent, I would go Kyogre, Zacian, Rillaboom, and maybe the Thundurus? You could also just bring Incineroar. You could flex actually between Grimmsnarl and Thundurus pretty easily here. Like, I don't think they have to bring any of those specifically. So, Whimsicott and Zacian is interesting. Like, I think the goal ideally is to try to eliminate their Zacian first. If we can eliminate Rillaboom, by the way, that also opens the door for Gastrodon in this game. Leading Rayquaza is also interesting because they're probably just not going to expect it and not know really what it's going to do here. So I'm going to give the Rayquaza a shot here. So I'm going to go Whimsicott, Rayquaza with Zacian and Gastrodon in the back. Umbreon here is designed more for like Sun matchups, and for Calyrex Shadow Rider, we're not going up against either here, so it doesn't make that much sense. Especially because it just takes so much damage from Zacian, and I can't really do much in return. That being said, in a best of 3, I think Umbreon's worth exploring just for, a single yawn on turn 1, for example, to, like, scare their leads a little bit. But I don't feel super comfortable in best of 1 bringing it. So they're going to go with Grimmsnarl and Kyogre. Okay. Grim can do a lot here. It can trick, for example. The Kyogre can just simply go for an Ice Beam onto the Rayquaza slot. They could also just like Dynamax Kyogre and max Hailstorm into Whimsicott, which is a possibility. Honestly, turn 1, I'm intrigued by the idea of just clicking Moonblast and Protect. Like, ideally, we get them to Dynamax the Kyogre and, like, click max Hailstorm. Because we have Airlock right now with Rayquaza, so even if you set up the Hail will be negated at the end of the turn, right? So I either, survive with Sash on Whimsicott, or I survive with Rayquaza. I take a decent amount of chip damage, but I at least stalled your turn or your Dynamax. And then the next turn I can switch Rayquaza out into either Zacian or Gastrodon, and then Tailwind with Whimsicott. So that's kind of my game plan right now. We'll see if it pays off. Okay, Protect. They're just going to go for Reflect. Now, Rayquaza is special here, but I'm not really willing to attack in front of a Kyogre. So, we get a free Moonblast, which is always nice. Okay. Pretty sweet damage there. And there's Max Hailstorm. Yep. Into Rayquaza. Okay, cool. That's still so much damage. I wonder if it's worth just attacking with Rayquaza here. I could play towards late game Dynamax Rayquaza still. That's a possibility, but it's not Life or Kyogre either. Okay. I do want to Tailwind now, I think, and then switch Rayquaza out into the Zacian. It's a fairly obvious switch, but I think it's still worth going for. And then with Tailwind up, basically, like, we'll have stalled out 2 turns of my opponent's Dynamax. Turn 3, I can go for just a Protect on the Zacian, sacrifice Whimsicott, get a free switch and back into Rayquaza, and then the ideal output is like a Rayquaza plus Zacian duo, where my opponent's Tailwind is stalled out. Sorry, not Tailwind, Dynamax. And we'll have Tailwind up on our end. So, one of the downsides of Rayquaza is, unfortunately, just doesn't match up super well against one of the most popular duos in Kyogre and Zacian. And that's one of the reasons why this isn't exactly, like, the most common restricted Pokemon, right? But, as always, you can certainly make it work. Okay, so Zacian's going to switch in for my opponent. They got the Reflect up, but they didn't get a Light Screen up. So, critically, I will be able to deal more damage with Rayquaza right now. Main thing, though, is still stalling out my opponent's Dynamax at the moment. Okay, great. They just go for another Hailstorm. This time into Zacian again. Beautiful. Okay, I'll take that then. That is not a bad turn for us. We've gotten Tailwind up. This next turn, I can just go for something like a Helping Hand into a Behemoth Blade. Helping Hand into Play Rough. Helping Hand, Sacred Sword. I can Cotton Spore as well. Does it make sense to switch out here in a Gastrodon? They're probably just going to Hailstorm the Whimsicott slot, right? And just Behemoth Blade Zacian. What's my opponent's last one? It's got to be Rillaboom, right? Because otherwise you are really weak to Gastrodon. So we can look towards, like, maxing Rayquaza. Zacian just might faint to a Behemoth Blade is my problem here, because I took that little bit of chip damage. The other play is to just Helping Hand plus Behemoth Blade. Okay, I'm going to go for it onto the Zacian slot on there, and they actually switch out. Okay, cool. Oh, it's Incineroar, so they just didn't bring Rillaboom. Okay, so that's interesting because it actually opens the door for a Gastrodon Dynamax at this point in the game. Yeah, I was like, if I were my opponent's shoes, I would definitely be bringing Rillaboom because otherwise your Gastrodon matchup is a little bit subpar, so that's definitely interesting. Mainly curious here if Kyogre's willing to commit a Geyser because me switching into Gastrodon is obviously a decent possibility. So I wonder if they respect that as an option. Okay, they just go for Hailstorm. Cool. So, Whimsicott faints now, but this grants me the free switch-in that I'm looking for. Okay. I don't know, I could max Gastrodon. Definitely a possibility. They never set up Light Screen. What's the alternative right now? I could just go into their Rayquaza. If I go into Rayquaza, they're just going to fake out into Zacian and then just Ice Beam into Rayquaza, right? I'm already intimidated with Zacian, so I probably want to swap that out. So I think it's better to just go into Gastrodon first here. Because at this point, if the Kyogre wants to damage the Zacian, it's going to have to use a Water type attack, thus giving me a Storm Drain boost, and that's obviously valuable. So I actually want to switch Zacian out here into the Rayquaza, and I still want to consider Dynamaxing Rayquaza, so I'm actually just going to Earth Power into Incineroar here and switch out, because Gastrodon isn't at much risk of taking damage this turn anyway. So you can see how if you're using Rayquaza, you kind of have to work really hard, unfortunately, when you're playing up against Kyogre. But we've stalled out their Dynamax at least, and we still have our Dynamax, right? The problem is I may be losing too many resources too quickly, because like my Tailwind's almost expiring. I've already lost the Pokemon as well. They still have Reflect up, so none of that adds up, you know, to be super good for us. But Rayquaza is going to come in here. Airlock is back up. Okay, Kyogre switches out. That's fine by me. Into Zacian. Cool. That makes sense. So Incineroar for a fake out here. Because now we can actually max the Rayquaza. And like just go for a Max Quake onto Zacian. Should they fake out. Ooh, it's fake out into Rayquaza. Okay, cool. Free Earth Power. No Shuka Berry. Nice. And that is going to get the knockout. Okay, not bad, not bad. The other thing about this game is that, like, while Rayquaza hasn't actually done any damage thus far, it's baited my opponent because my opponent has seen it as the main threat, right? So I've essentially, like, my opponent's been 2 turns of their Kyogre's Dynamax and set up a Reflect just to deal with the potential threat that is Rayquaza. So this is an interesting example in Pokemon where even though a Pokemon might not necessarily be picking up, like, knockouts, it can still apply a ton of pressure, right? And this is interesting now because I can actually max Rayquaza just to get a special defense boost via Max Quake onto Gastrodon, right? Because, like, I don't think they're going to be expecting the Max Quake here. I guess it's pretty safe for them to just protect the Zacian, though, given that it's the last turn of, Tailwind. Then I guess my question is, does Ice Beam KO Rayquaza after a special defense boost and we're Dynamaxed? Probably. So maybe we conserve Rayquaza for the late game. I just, like, if my opponent's not expecting to get one-shot here, it's really tempting to just max and go for Max Quake here. They might feel safe, honestly. Okay. I'm kind of down. Yawn into Kyogre. We're going to Dynamax, and I'm just going to go for the Quake. This, I think, like, Dynamaxing Gastrodon here is probably, like, the slightly safer route to take, but like I said, this Rayquaza set is kind of unexpected, and even if I just trade Rayquaza for Zacian this turn, that trade is 100% in my favor. Because I would get a special defense boost on Gastrodon, and I would get the Yawn off into the Kyogre slot. Meaning then, if we trade, I bring out my Zacian, I protect Zacian, and simply just, yeah, let Kyogre fall asleep. And they're not going to protect the Zacian. Okay, hopefully Life Orb Max Quick here gets the one-hit knockout. Let's see. Beautiful. So this turn was pretty interesting, right? Because, like, the worst case is that they protect Zacian and then Ice Beam goes into the Rayquaza slot. And even in that scenario, I think it's still, like, playable. But here I was thinking, yeah, my opponent might just, like, not expect to get the knockout here. Or, sorry, might not expect me to get the KO because they set up Reflect, right? So you're probably feeling pretty safe with Zacian. And they actually opt for Thunder, so... Okay, interesting. Thunder, not exactly the most reliable option there instead of Ice Beam. They might be running Blizzard, but of course with Airlock here, the Thunder actually gets, yeah, negated. Or not negated, sorry, but the accuracy is negated, so it's not 100%. Anyway, they are Light Clay here on Grim. We did just get the Yawn onto Kyogre. Now it's pretty easy to just protect the Rayquaza. I can just Earth Power into Kyogre here and Max Guard. Kyogre falls asleep, and that should be game over at this point. So I'm really glad, like, Rayquaza here actually stalled out my opponent's Dynamax, picked up a big one-hit knockout ultimately. By the way, one play my opponent could have gone for there just to prevent the sleep was Self Thunder Wave, because then the Thunder Wave overrides the Yawn, because you paralyze yourself before sleep goes off. But now they should just fall asleep, so... Okay. And they were Ice Beam there in the end, so yeah, I don't think they needed to really click Thunder there. But to be honest, even if they have gotten the knockout onto Rayquaza, I would have just spread out Zacian, click Double Protect, Kyogre falls asleep, and we should win the game with Gastrodon Zacian against the Kyogre at that point in the match. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm just content to Earth Power into Kyogre, and Max Airstream into Grimmsnarl. Actually, here it's a little bit more reliable to just get rid of Grimmsnarl, so it can't get status conditions onto the Zacian, and then Zacian would win against Kyogre. But they end up forfeiting. So that was an awesome first game with Rayquaza. Like, obviously in the early game, I didn't really get to do any damage with it, but that was okay because, like I said, we forced a Reflect out of my opponent, we forced 2 Max Hailstorms from my opponent, and in the end, their Kyogre wasn't able to really accomplish that much, and we had set ourselves in a position where we had Tailwind, Dynamax Rayquaza, and I'm just really satisfied to see it get the one-hit knockout onto Zacian. Now, once again, obviously that turn my opponent could have gone for the Protect into Ice Beam, but... Like I said, I felt like they might have been lured into a false sense of security with Reflect being up, given that, yeah, it's clear they were thinking Rayquaza was physical rather than special. So, yeah, super pleased about that first game, and let's keep going. Alright, next game here, and it is another Zacian Kyogre team with Landorus and Thundurus, as well as Indeedee and Whimsicott. I think it's the same four as the previous one. I mean, if you've read the report, and as I mentioned, like, this is one of the less desirable matchups, and so I'm, I guess, a little bit sad that the first 2 games with this team we run into probably the worst restricted matchup for it, but granted, Zacian Kyogre is, like, still, one of the most common duos. It's just, like, there's so many duels that people can use right now, right? And on the ladder, I feel like you often run into, like, a really wide net, but today we're just running into the standards. So, I'm going to go Whimsicott. I like Whimsicott Zacian here with Rayquaza and Gastrodon in the back. The idea behind Whimsicott and Zacian is that, like, the Zacian applies a lot of pressure onto the opposing Kyogre, so I could go for something just like a Tailwind Play Rough. And the thing is that the Kyogre should be pretty hesitant to just Dynamax immediately in this game because we have Gastrodon as a potential switch-in. Right? So, let's see. Generally, though, the idea is that if I lead Rayquaza, Whimsicott, Kyogre, and Zacian all threaten with super effective damage into it, and that's no good for me. It's actually going to be Indeedee and Thundurus. Okay, I don't mind that too much. I feel like them leading Indeedee essentially states that should be a Defiant Thundurus on my opponent's end. So, turn 1, I don't need to Tailwind immediately yet. I could just go for a Moonblast Behemoth Blade. Depends if you're Psychic Seed Indeedee here. Yep, okay. So instead of Moonblast Behemoth Blade, I could actually Helping Hand Behemoth Blade here. Now, turn 1 is interesting because if you're my opponent, you could protect the Indeedee, or you could just like Max Airstream Expanding Force, or protect Thundurus Expanding Force to break Focus Sash on Whimsicott. So I definitely want a Helping Hand. The question is just who I want to launch Blade into. Follow Me and Airstream would be their safe play, but it would actually give me a pretty major advantage in my opinion. If I were them, truthfully, I would protect Thundurus and Expanding Force with Indeedee. The obvious play, though, I think. I mean, like, they could also just Follow Me Airstream, in which I would gladly take that trade-off. I'm gonna target the Indeedee slot. Let's see if they go for the Protect. Okay, Thundurus is gonna max, so probably no Protect coming out from that. I'm hoping they just go for the safe play, which is Follow Me plus Airstream, because if they go for that, I'll get the knockout onto Indeedee, and it's a great trade, because then turn 2 I can just Tailwind with Whimsicott. But obviously seeing this max, I'm like, maybe I should have launched my attack onto Thundurus instead, but I don't know, Protect Expanding Force is really scary there. Okay, so there's Helping Hand. Okay, looks like Indeedee here actually opted neither for Follow Me nor Protect, so it was probably just an Airstream Expanding Force for my opponent. And so, yeah, that's a good trade-off for us at the end of the day. As long as Indeedee didn't Protect there would be good. So I think they were just trying to get the knockout onto Whimsicott immediately. Now, what does become a little bit interesting is if they have the Whimsicott in the back from their end, because then you can just bring Whimsicott out immediately and just Tailwind with it. And since Thundurus has the speed boost, then the Thundurus will outspeed both of my Pokemon going into the next turn. But at the end of the day, that's not a bad trade, because that's one turn of their Dynamax to not even pick up a knockout yet, right? They actually bring out Landorus. Okay. If it's Landorus here, that presumes that, what, Kyogre is the last one? Or Zacian? They only brought one of the two? That's interesting. Okay. This is a free Tailwind then. And with Zacian, the question is, do I want to consider switching out? Because it's pretty easy to go into Gastrodon. And I think the answer is yes, because we're intimidated. After this, we'll have stalled out 2 turns of my opponent's Dynamax, which is pretty good. And as always, Thundurus becomes really weak once you stall out their Dynamax. So, if anything, Gastro feels a little bit awkward right now because it doesn't really take advantage of the Tailwind, but it's really meant to just soak up some damage here. So, they're going to go for another Airstream into the Gastro slot. That was a lot more than I would have actually anticipated, to be honest. I guess I could have just stayed in with Zacian there. But to be honest, even losing both Pokemon here is not that bad, because it's a free switch in for me into both of my Mons. Yeah. I'm really curious about the Landorus set, but okay, they answered my question. Because now I have Tailwind up, so the Landorus has a speed boost. Rayquaza has 2 speed boosts. Or sorry, not Rayquaza. Thundurus has 2 speed boosts. But the thing is, I can just keep max Airstreaming now, right? And I can essentially ignore the Thundurus slot as of right now. Yeah, so I think we're actually poised for a pretty sweet late game Rayquaza Zacian sweep now. But I have to execute it properly. But like double checking the field state, so it's like Thundurus can give another speed boost onto their Landorus, but then Zacian should still outpace them. So like I'm down to just Dynamax and then Airstream into the Landorus slot and Behemoth Blade into it. The idea is that like we just want to keep getting speed boosts, right? Landorus could very easily Protect or switch out here. If you switch out though, Zacian or Kyogre should just faint, and then I get a speed boost, and I'm using Special Rayquaza here. So Special Rayquaza will actually just get a one-hit knockout, I think, into most of the Mons. So they are going to commit the switch there. That's fine. And it is Zacian as their last one. Cool. Works for me. The one thing we'll want to be careful about is Rayquaza going for Max Wormwind to activate Defiant on Thundurus, because it's not Life Orb, so Assault Vest here certainly could be the case. And if it's AV, then it might actually survive the Life Orb Max Wormwind. In fact, I would expect it to. So I think the main advantage for us in this game is just speed, right? Like, they didn't bring Whimsicott, meaning they couldn't match my Tailwind, and that means that I can actually outpace them with my slightly slower Rayquaza as well as Zacian, and that's a really big deal. But like, this Whimsicott is caught in sport to help get you around potentially like negative matchup, right? Where it's like with opposing Whimsicotts, even if they Tailwind and you Tailwind, well, you can Con and Spore them the next turn to put the speeds back into your favor. Okay, cool. They're just gonna go for Airstream. Yep. Onto Rayquaza, that's fine. And we've done what you always should try to do against Thundurus, which is stall out its Dynamax and leave it on the field. Not always, that's way too much of a generalization, but it can be very good to stall out Thundurus' max and then leave it out on the field, because now, what is it really going to do? At best, maybe click Foul Play, that's probably the scariest option, but now we should be in really, really good shape. Okay. Especially because the Rayquaza here, of course, is special and not physical, so my opponent's definitely not going to anticipate that. There's not really much to worry about from Thundurus at this point, offensively-wise, because, like, the only attack that you'd really get, like, normally scares me is Foul Play, but your Landorus is intimidating me here, so you only decrease my attack further, right? And so, even if Landorus protects here, that's fine. This next turn, I'm willing to just commit a double Protect into it, because the Thundurus just doesn't threaten me offensively at all right now. I still don't know the item on Thundurus. It's like I just want to assume it's Assault Vest here. We know it's Life Orb on the Landorus, so I'm willing to just Airstream into Landorus here. And actually, Airstream probably just one-shots it, no? We've still got Tailwind and a Speed Boost. Tailwind and a Speed Boost. They've got 3 Speed Boosts. Occasionally, you'll see Thundurus like Dynamax, but also have like Thunder Wave. So that could be interesting. I feel okay just clicking Max Airstream into Landorus and protecting Zacian here, just to play it safe. Because Zacian isn't going to get a one-hit knockout. I think Max Airstream should one-shot Landorus anyway here, but they actually end up just forfeiting. So, okay. I mean, Rayquaza was really poised for success there. I think, like, there was not much of a way for them to get out of that double up that previous turn, right? Especially as soon as Landorus had revealed Life Orb as well. Like, I'm always willing to make that play. And so I think, like, Thundurus is a very wishy-washy Pokemon in this format, right? And in the end, my opponent's Thundurus spent so many turns of Dynamax to... I guess in the end, I actually did pick up 2 knockouts, but those 2 knockouts weren't worth it because it allowed me to get my Dynamax threat next to my Zacian, get Tailwind up with Whimsicott, and really be in a position for success there. So, yeah, even though Zacian Kyogre is not like one of the more desirable restricted duels for this team to go up against, we've managed to beat both so far, right? So it goes to show that you can still find ways to win, but yeah, I'm pretty pleased about that one, mainly because it was easier because my opponent didn't bring the Whimsicott. Would have been interesting if they did bring Whimsicott because I still had that Cotton Spore tech. But there's a lot of other things that can happen should they bring it. So, yeah. Then the Rayquaza claims another victim, though. So let's look for a third. Third game of the day, and this time around, we are up against Zacian and Calyrex Shadow Rider. This basically looks like the team Emilio Forbes used to win the Secaucus Regional Championships a couple of weekends ago. So, how do we want to approach this? The first thing is I think, like, Rayquaza under Tailwind can be super good against my opponent's entire team. Umbreon's a little bit interesting here because, of course, it like is decent into Thundurus as well as the Calyrex Shadow Rider, so we can maybe pull something off there. Incineroar is obviously very good into Calyrex and the Zacian, but not very good into the Thundurus. So, I think in the original team report, like the recommended route to take is to go with Whimsicott and Zacian with Umbreon in the back, or Zacian Umbreon. Now, Cotton Spore is pretty valuable here as well. So we could go with the Whim, Zacian, Umbreon, and then, you know, Rayquaza, I think, is pretty much the clear-cut Dynamax option here. So I think I like that approach. I mean, Gastrodon doesn't really make too much sense here. Incineroar can be very decent here, but, like, the question is, does it do enough in the early game, essentially? So, yeah. Another interesting to think about here is that we can actually think about clicking Cotton Spore. It will activate Defiant on Thundurus, which can be kind of scary here, but it might be worth it if it means we can get the speed advantage. So we definitely need to get Tailwind up in this game to start. But yeah, Cotton Spore is going to be really important here. But I think like the first 2 to 3 turns of this game are going to be very critical. So they're going to go with Thundurus and Zacian. Okay. Tailwind into Behemoth Blade on Thundurus turn 1 is really safe in my opinion. I don't really see too much counterplay to that. Now, they can Max Airstream and Behemoth Blade, but then it would give me a free switch in, right? Yeah. There's Zacian's faster, so I'm down to just Tailwind here and chunk away at Thundurus. Because then what's interesting is, let's say you split your damage, then my Zacian's in amazing shape going to turn 2. Let's say you double up onto my Zacian, I bring in Rayquaza, then the next turn, I can go for something like just a max Wormwind to ideally finish off Thundurus, drop Zacian's attack. And at that point, Behemoth Blade or Play Rough I don't think should one-shot me. Umbreon is going to be really critical in this late game against Calyrex Shadow Rider, and my opponent has 2 of the bigger... Well, actually, Umbreon's quite good against Thundurus as well here, I suppose. It's mainly Thundurus as like Max Knuckle, for example. But being able to get a Tailwind up early here is really good. Like, so much about this team is putting Rayquaza and Zacian in a position where they can outspeed your opponent. No Protect from their Zacian. Not really surprising, but I was hoping to see that maybe. Another play I was contemplating was just helping hand Behemoth Blade into their Zacian. Try to get the knockout onto that on turn 1, because then it really opens the door for Umbreon in this game. But that is so much damage on a Thundurus. Nice. Actually, helping hand Behemoth Blade into Thundurus would have definitely been the better play there, because we would have just knocked it out. I think we're still in fine shape, though, honestly. That was just so much damage onto their Maxmon on turn 1, and actually, I don't know if Airstream even KOs here. It does not. That's beautiful. Okay, cool. That's a really good turn 1 then. The downside of helping hand Blade onto Thundurus turn 1 is Thundurus could just go for a Protect, right? Your Life Orb, okay. It's pretty easy for me to split my damage here. Like, Thundurus max guarding here feels fairly obvious. I don't know if Moonblast is going to knock out Thundurus from that range. Play I want to go for is, like, go for an aggressive prediction and helping hand Blade into their Zacian. But they know I have helping hand here. And given the speed advantage we have right now, I think we should just leverage that. So I'm down to just Moonblast into Thundurus, and then just play rough, Behemoth Blade into Zacian. No need to take any big risks here, in my opinion. They do go for the max guard, though, so I could have punished this max guard super heavily, right? But it's fine. If you get the knockout here, it's just a free switch it into my Rayquaza, and Rayquaza's looking very nice right now. So I didn't want to chance it and helping hand Behemoth Blade and have their Zacian protect, and then let their Thundurus get another max Airstream off. Because then your Zacian gets 2 speed boosts, and that's not desirable for me. Okay, they just go for Sacred Sword here to finish off my Zacian. That's fine. Works for me. And now it is time for... I just want to double check Rayquaza's speed real quick. 161, so we hit 232. 232. Okay. 232. Their Zacian has a speed boost. Sorry, not 232. 332. 332. Their max speed Zacian. We should still outpace them, right? So I think here it's fine to just Moonblast into Thundurus, max Rayquaza, and then I'm going to go for an Airstream here. Actually, do I need an Airstream right now? Why would I Airstream? They're at +1 speed. I'm at neutral. I have Tailwind up. I have 2 turns of Tailwind up. I can Quake for a special defense boost, which isn't bad. And it guarantees me the knockout even if they protect, so... I don't think I need an Airstream boost right now, because I still have Tailwind up, and I can Cotton Spore as well. Yeah. Okay. Although, yeah, obviously, like, the last turn, it's like, it would have felt really satisfying to just Helping Hand Blade one-shot the Zacian there, but because I'd already... Oh, no, I didn't reveal Helping Hand yet. I just Tailwinded on turn 1. Yeah. Because I didn't reveal Helping Hand, it was probably worth going for. Okay, Moonblast into Thundurus. Nice. Gets the knockout there. Beautiful. I wasn't sure if it was going to KO from that range, but the Thundurus clearly had, like, no bulk at all, which is the standard for those sets. And we Quake. Beautiful. That should just be GG, honestly, from this point on, because, like, we knocked out their Dynamax, we got a special defense boost, which is really valuable against Calyrex Shadow Rider. I have ultimate speed control right now with Cotton Spore as well, so... Our good old Rayquaza is looking mighty fine right now. Okay. So now it should be Calyrex plus a 4th. Rillaboom, Incin. Nothing really scares me that much, and Rillaboom's probably the best one to see, right? Because I can just max Airstream it. Oh, and it's Gastrodon. They didn't even bring Calyrex. That's interesting. Okay. With Gastrodon, then, I think it's very clear-cut here. Rillaboom always just hard loses into Rayquaza. It's, once again, one of the upsides of using this mon. So, like, I can just simply go for a Helping Hand here, and then just go for a max Wormwind to one-shot the Gastrodon. Umbreon's always going to win against the Rillaboom in the end game, and the only way they could beat me right now is if they were to freeze me with an Ice Beam. Rillaboom can't touch Rayquaza right now. Like, your best option would be something like a Drum Beating just for speed control, but I think the odds of that would be just super, super slim. So, Helping Hand. Okay, they go for Fake Out. Perfect. Like, the one thing we need to not do here, it probably wouldn't have even mattered, to be honest. Like, actually, even if I just Airstreamed the Rillaboom, we probably still win this game. But, like, why not just take the free one-hit KO in front of us, right? So, ultimately, the main thing about this game was speed once again, right? I think, like, in both this game and the previous game, my opponent had, like, fast Pokemon that could really threaten me. But because Whimsicott was able to set up Tailwind, it gave me just an absolutely huge advantage and allowed me to basically overwhelm their relatively frail Pokemon with offense pretty early on. But like I said, I think in this game, I actually could have just gone like Helping Hand, Behemoth Blade in 2 different positions. Especially because on turn 2, I was like, I'd already revealed Helping Hand, but no, that was like from a previous game, not in this game. So, you can just Helping Hand Airstream now. But this is like the offensive potential of Special Rayquaza, right? It has a very good matchup into a lot of the common, like, non-restricted support Pokemon, right? It demolishes Rillaboom. You can demolish Incineroar with Life Orb Max Quake. And so, if you're able to check your opponent's Dynamax Pokemon relatively on, this Pokemon just can completely sweep through. So, yeah. It was just Sash Calyrex. This one had Snarl. Classic Zacian with the substitute there. Life Orb with Crunch. Just AV. Safety Goggles. And then just classic Yawn. So, yeah. Nothing too crazy there. But it's been a fast couple of games, so let's look for one final one. Final game of the day here, and we're actually up against Yveltal and Zacian. Okay. Grim and Thundurus can both be really valuable for speed control here, whether it be like Trick Iron Ball, or Electro Web, or Thunder Wave, or Scary Face. I think I prefer just Whimsicott Rayquaza here, Zacian in the back. Probably Incineroar as the last one, although Umbreon is somewhat interesting, especially if I can Yawn into the Yveltal. But I think Instant just helps out quite a lot against Zacian. So I'll bring it. I don't feel great about any of the fourth mons here, I think. Like, Gastrodon doesn't really do much. It just kind of gets dunked on by Yveltal, especially if, you know, they have Oblivion Wing, which almost all Yveltals carry. Incineroar is good against Zacian here, not very good into a lot of the other mons, especially if it's Defiant Thundurus. And then Umbreon here kind of gets dunked on by their Zacian, and also doesn't do that much. Like, maybe it's worth considering just because it can Yawn into Yveltal. So, yeah. They're going to go with Grim and Instant, though. Okay, so this is a hyper-passive lead. But, you know, the goal with these leads often are to get screens up, get disruption up, basically stall out a Dynamax, and so I'm going to be a little bit careful when actually Dynamaxing here. So let's see. It's pretty easy for them to... You know what's really interesting here? Like, do you just click Fake Out into Whimsicott and set up a Reflect? Because I could take advantage of the fact that I'm special here, just go for Max Airstream onto Grim and Helping Hand. I actually really like that play. The downside here is that they could Parting Shot into Rayquaza, but they might be lured into a false sense of security. And if they do go for Fake Out and a Reflect on turn 1, this is such a huge lead that I get from it, right? So I'm willing to try it out here. The downside is if they go for Light Screen and Parting Shot into Rayquaza, so there's still a lot that can go wrong here. But let's see. Okay, that's the beautiful thing about Helping Hand, higher priority than the Fake Out. Or go before the Fake Out. Oh no. That is not a desirable outcome. It was actually Trick Lagging Tail. Which is probably the worst set to run into because now I never have the speed advantage. So, Trick Lagging Tail is something we've used, you know, and seen previously in Sword and Shield. I feel like it's only now really starting to come back in Series 12. Like, Trick Iron Ball's really been the dominant set. Great play by my opponent on turn 1. I got a little bit greedy there. And I think it's worth going for because, like, the risk versus reward is decent there, and Trick Lagging Tail is one of the less common variants, right? Even if it's Trick Iron Ball there, it's actually not too bad because I can just Tailwind and Cotton Spore in subsequent turns, and I already would like negate, or not negate the speed drop immediately, but I would get to -1, essentially. And then so Whimsicott can Tailwind, right? But Lagging Tail is the worst thing to run into because now I just always move last. So this is going to be an uphill battle from this point onwards. I think the goal now is to chip away at Yveltal enough where Zacian can come out and just simply click Play Rough or Behemoth Blade to KO it. Now, Helping Hand from Whimsicott applies an immense amount of pressure, and it's a super, you know, nice option to have right now. So, yeah, it's not over by any means, but anytime you get your Dynamax Pokemon tricked and it's a Lagging Tail that you receive, it's not a good start. So, nicely done. And that's the thing with the lead like Instant plus Grimmsnarl, right? It looks like deceptively weak, but there's so many options that they can go for. Whether it just be Fake Out plus Screens, for example, you have a lot of options. So Incineroar comes back out. If I were my opponent, I would consider just clicking Fake Out and Airstream into Whimsicott. I really want to ideally get Tailwind up to deal with this Yveltal. What's their last one going to be? Just Zacian? Okay. I'm actually down to just Max Quake their Incineroar here and then switch out into my Incineroar. The idea is I want to go up like 2-4 or 4-2 in terms of Pokemon count, ideally. And, like, I could target Yveltal right now, but the reason I'm so hard focused on knocking out Incineroar is because this is a pretty big nuisance to the Zacian that I have in the back. So if I can eliminate this, then at least paves the way for Zacian to succeed a little bit better. But the question is, can I really, like, deal with the Yveltal easily right now? Now, the interesting thing about the lagging tail is that if the Incineroar actually clicks Parting Shot and goes out into Zacian, it's Zacian coming in and eating up the Max Quake, actually. But I'm already at -1. Should they Parting Shot me, I'll be at -2, which obviously isn't great. So let's see. Okay, they opt for Airstream, that's fine. Notably, no Fake Out there, though. Although this gets very interesting if you do actually just pivot your Incineroar out into Zacian immediately. Because you're just coming in and eating up a Max Quake. Okay, they go for Burning Jealousy. I don't mind that very much. The Burning Jealousy, by the way, covers for a Zacian switch in. You might even just get the knockout onto Zacian, but the Zacian on our end here is pretty bulky. So, you know, if we don't get the KO, the idea is Zacian comes in, just gets burnt, and if you burn Zacian from this point on in the game, you probably just win immediately. So, can definitely respect that option. Also, it doesn't necessarily even cover for Zacian switching. I mean, it covers for Zacian switching, but they might also just be like, well, I want to KO your Whimsicott right now. So, all of those make sense. Fake Out plus Max Quake here is really safe into the instant slot, so I'm just going to go for that. Okay, they're going to switch, so I wonder if it's Zacian coming in. It is. Okay, I mean, I don't mind that, I guess. Like, we're at a position where my Zacian maybe can pull off a decent late game sweep, but the problem is, Rayquaza is just going to get one shot, and there's no way I can ever outspeed my opponent. So one thing I could have done to read into that was actually hard switch my Incineroar out into Whimsicott, let them bring me down to Focus Sash, and then just Max Quake into Zacian. Because the problem is now I don't have Incineroar to cycle in for Intimidate or Fake Out, and that's not great. See how much a Life Orb Max Quake at -1 does into their Zacian. That was a really just strong turn one from their end, so well played. Oof, that's really not that much damage, unfortunately. Okay. So Dynamax ends now. It's gotta be Whimsicott out first. If I bring out Zacian, actually, Zacian was probably the better approach. Bring out Zacian just protects. No, but if I protect Zacian, they can Psycho and Incineroar too easily, I think, for Intimidates. I can Tailwind right now. Yeah, I should just Earth Power here. -2 or +2 speed def. It's not really that valuable. Tailwind at least sets up my Zacian for the end game, but I think it's a little bit too late because Rayquaza here just like not getting to move first is too much of an issue. I guess unless they double up onto Whimsicott. If they double up onto Whims and like Life Orb Earth Power actually KOs the Zacian, that'd be great, but the Zacian appears to be quite bulky there given how well it took that Max Quake earlier for -1. Or us being at -1. Okay, it's just Behemoth Blade. Yep, and they target Rayquaza, and it gets the knockout. So the end game is I at least have this Zacian out. It's 3v1. Zacian can actually pretty realistically get a one-hit KO onto everything. Part of the question is, do you cycle in for Intimidates from the Incineroar? Because if I don't KO the Incineroar and they get it in without me knocking it out, I probably just lose. Go in, +1, +2. Actually, they're just so fast here, right? Like, if I were them, I would probably switch out Zacian into Incineroar because the Yveltal's faster right now. I'm going to play rough into Yveltal. And Cotton Spore. There's also a chance they don't switch out either Pokemon here. Oh, wow. Did Zacian protect here? Okay, that makes sense. At first I was like, man, if they just protected Yveltal, that seems incredibly risky, because if I Behemoth Blade into Zacian, that actually just could be a win for me. So now they know I have Cotton Spore. How does this change how they play? Now I can essentially get a knockout. Like I said, I would still switch Zacian out into Incineroar here. To which then I can go for Play Rough into and Helping Hand here instead. They might just be willing to attack with both Pokemon here as well. I think that's also a fine route to take. Then my line would have been to Cotton Spore, Behemoth Blade into their Zacian. But then the thing is, Incineroar still gets another Intimidate onto me, so I don't know if my Zacian can ever really win the 1v2. So, it was close, but the turn 1 was just too strong for my opponent's end. And they stay in with both. Yep, good play. Yep, it's probably foul play and Blade onto my Zacian. Oh, that's so much damage. And Blade's just gonna get the knockout. So it's like, yeah, I could have Cotton Sport and Bladed their Zacian, but then another foul play just KOs me, right? So I think this game very much highlights the downside of not having the speed advantage, and I feel like so much about this team is putting Rayquaza in a position and putting Zacian in a position where you can move before your opponent. And Rayquaza inherently is such a nice partner for the Zacian because you can boost its speed via Max Airstream, but the lagging tail in itself was just so strong on turn 1, meaning that Rayquaza can never move first. And the other thing is that Yveltal's a little bit tricky because Whimsicott can't go for Cotton Spore onto it, right? So, great execution by my opponent there. But, yeah, we played against a lot of different archetypes in the end, right? It was 2 Zacian Ogres, a Calyrex Zacian, and then Yveltal Zacian here. So, glad to finally highlight a really cool Rayquaza team. I think there was a lot of thought, obviously, that went into this team. So, once again, please go check out that team report. I've linked it down in the description below. Feel free to try it out yourselves. Leave a like if you enjoy, and I'll catch you all soon. All right, peace.